Back in the day, V8s, that's the one everybody wanted. But today, sadly, the world seems to have changed. It's all V6 twin turbos. And in some cases, V6 twin turbos with electrification layered on, as we found out about a week ago. Which brings us to a very odd question. If a V8 can exist in today's day and age, is it better? And if so, how? So I am not going to bury the lead here. If a V8 can not only see the light of day from any specific car manufacturer and pull off the trick of getting into the hands of real civilians that drive actual cars in today's day and age, it would have to be unusually good. And let's say, for the sake of discussion, you were a sports car manufacturer, I don't know, based in Zuffenhausen, you would probably want to pilfer your best V8 from your more expensive sedan. The only problem with that is people pay more money for that sedan. So how are you going to take that without them noticing? Well, you could start with a 4-liter twin turbocharged V8 that's 620 horsepower in the more expensive car, but in the value-oriented GTS, you could fool with a boost, change some other things, and bring the output down to 473 horsepower, which is more than the last time we drove this car on the track in Bahrain, and the torque, 457 pound-feet. Now that, like the very fancy 620 horsepower car, does drive all 4 wheels through an 8-speed PDK. Now, detuning aside, there is one pertinent aspect that is incredibly hard to hide in the transition from the Turbo S to the GTS, and that would be abysmal fuel economy, 15, 21, 17 combined, which means we have to focus on performance figures because that's really what this is about. And here is where I get confused, because the Turbo S, it is a fast car, but so is this. 3.9 seconds to 60 as a basis of comparison, not with the Turbo S, but the twin turbocharged V6 hybrid that we drove about a week ago. That's 3.5 seconds to 60. Then there's the VMAX. This is 186 miles an hour. Just for point of order, I do have to say that is 1 mile an hour faster in VMAX than the hybrid version with the V6 twin turbo. Here we go again, yet another Porsche Panamera, this one with a slopey arse end and 4,554 pounds, or depending on how you express your weights and measures, 2,066 kilograms. Something rather important to point out. That is 512 pounds less than that hybrid Sport Turismo we recently drove on the same road with that Sport Plus mode. Oh yes, that's a V8. Oh my God, it bites at 3,000 RPM, and then when it goes to about 5,000 RPM, it just pulls like a freight train. This develops power so much differently than that hybrid. Oh my God, this comes across, it pops you in the face and says, this is an incredibly fast car, and it's complemented by the way the transmission works with this engine. There's so much control over the transmission where you can shift manually, you do not get denied shifts, and you can really dig down from low gears to wind out the engine, something you normally don't get in a V8. That's one of the most magnificent things about this and the turbo, but then there's the obvious, that this is significantly cheaper than the turbo. And then that gets us to the driving dynamics. And here, that's the biggest difference. And I would say this is the thing that separates this and the 4SE hybrid. It's the weight. You notice that 512 pounds immediately. This feels like a different vehicle, even though it has the exact same wheelbase. It's so much easier to push aggressively around corners. It's so much easier to drive around town, even when not pushing it aggressively. Put it another way, and I know I really shouldn't be saying this because somebody in Atlanta and Zuffenhausen's not going to like it. This car is so much easier to drive faster than that 4SE hybrid. Does it mean that the driving dynamics is totally different? Not really, because you still have the 4-wheel steer, you still have the same setup, the double wishbones in the front, the multi-link in the rear. What's different here is it's working a bit more efficiently. If you notice that 4-wheel steering so much more here. Now, pushing on to another aspect about driving dynamics that really isn't a fair discussion with this specific Mamba Green GTS. It's unusually equipped. It has the carbon ceramic rotors. I don't know why someone would fit them to this car to drive it around town. Yes, They work incredibly well. They're a bit sharper than the brakes on regular Panameras that we have driven. But the reality of the situation is the best, I'd say, application for these brakes would be the track. I don't know who the hell would take this thing to a track. So let's just press on from the brakes. The biggest thing you notice here, and this is back to back between the 4SE Hybrid and this, it's so much sharper than that car that weighs an additional 512 pounds. Everything just works a bit better. It's kind of like, are any of you marathon runners? After you finish a marathon, there's just more spring in your step. The air just smells and tastes better. That's kind of the difference here. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game on the Options Game with today's contestant, one of my favorite Porsche Panameras. This one updated for 2021, the Panamera GTS. And yes, this one has the fastback. It would be more of a favorite to me if it was a Sport Turismo, but the fastback is a bit cheaper, $129,300. I do feel it prudent to point out that is exactly $12,000 more than the V6 twin-turbo 4SE Hybrid we drove about a week ago. Then the color. Now, I am used to Porsche sending horrible colors in Panameras, except for that papaya, that was pretty good. But this, rather than me wax on poetically how lovely Mamba Green is, normally when I bring these things out and about, no one asks me about the color on Panameras. Actually, the only people that ask me about Panameras are dudes when they see a Turbo SE Hybrid. This one, I had two babushkas come up to me after getting out of a Kia Sportage, a white one at that, and they said, "Oh, what a pretty color." So I would say, just because the babushkas like it, it is worth the $840. The interior, not so much. It's black. Can we change that? Then a very important option, the rear axle steer, $1,640. This really should be standard on these things. And then we gotta have the Porsche Dynamic Chassis Control and the Porsche Torque Vectoring Plus. Also, I really feel this should be standard as well. And it's an expensive option, well worth it though, $5,010. Perhaps we package those two, make them $3,500. Think of it as like the Costco discount because everybody would be getting them. Then one more performance option, which I don't think I would do on this car because I'm not taking it on a track, and that is the carbon ceramic rotors for $8,970. Then we press on to the wheels, and here they look good with a Mamba Green. I don't know if I would pay though $2,160 for the 911 Turbo style 21-inch wheels. I would like to see these with like the modern updated Fuchs they do over on the 911s. Can we try that? Then the lane keep assist, $1,060. Why is that optional on a $130,000 car? Then the Bose stereo system. I've had this back to back now. And just as an aside here, you guys know I'm a huge Burmester fan. But the Bose in these two, the last one and this one, there's no bass. I don't know what's going on here, so I wouldn't spend the $1,600 for it. Then soft closed doors, usually part of the executive package, which is like $5 grand. This is a bargain at $740. Then the only other thing we have to add is the destination and handling von Leipzig, Deutschland for $1,350 for a total suggested retail price of $152,600. Put another way, significantly cheaper than that Turbo S we drove a couple of months ago. That car was north of 200 grand. So even after all of that, I am still struggling as to this or a 4SE Hybrid, or for that matter, the Turbo SE Hybrid. But let's put that one aside, because I would argue that one, that's kind of like a supercar replacement. It's just so ridiculous, 700 horsepower. So we need to focus on this, or the 4SE Hybrid, and there are benefits of both. At 4SE Hybrid, one cannot argue with the EV propulsion, specifically torque from zero, and frankly, the usability around town. A little report back to you guys. I was able to drive that thing almost the entire week on electricity, with the exception of driving it up here. That's a huge accomplishment, which I love. But then, for a cheapskate New Yorker like me, the swan song of the GTS, whether it is a Panamera, Boxster, Cayman, or other Porsches, there's just value to them. I know that's hysterical to say when it comes to a Porsche, but there's bits fitted to standard here to make this more of an equation for cheapskates like me. And one of them has been absolutely slapping you in the face, and that is the interior. Notice all that Alcantara. It's everywhere. It's on the seats, it's on the door panels, it's even on the headliner. And that's the part that really stands out and makes this interior different than other Panameras. Yeah, one can have this in other Panameras, but I believe it's like a $3,000 option. But moving beyond the land of dress up, there are some functional items that change, and that's another one that's been slapping you across the face throughout this entire episode, and that would be the seats. And again, whether it's a Panamera, Boxster, Cayman, Cayenne, usually GTSs are fitted with better seats, meaning more support and more adjustments, and this is no exception. And I gotta believe, if one is gonna check the box for a GTS, it's not exactly the cheapest Panamera on offer, it's not the most expensive, but that's got to appeal to folks that need performance, that are gonna take it out to days like this, or mountain roads, or even autocross days. It's more than value, it's usability. I am going to interrupt myself there and condense this down to 3 points. First and foremost, this is significantly sharper. It is clearly the driver's car between this and the 4SE Hybrid, which brings us to point number 2. If I were to want a daily that would cost 150 grand, I'd have a hard time saying no to one with electrification for all of the benefits of electrification we've discussed over many years, which brings us to point number 3, and that is I'm still scratching my head as to why this car exists. It is way too close for comfort to the Turbo S, to the point where I'd have a hard time saying yes to the Turbo S because this one is that good. Which brings us to the wish list, and here you probably know where I'm going, the 48-volt system. And there's a couple of reasons why I say that. Yes, potentially it would help with fuel economy, but really not that. I'm looking for more reliability, meaning less moving parts, which would make a complex vehicle like this potentially cheaper to operate past 5 years. And then there is some chassis control, which we've seen with this engine in other Volkswagen Group cars, namely the Bentley. So here, this would do a couple of things in one fell swoop and potentially provide better torque at lower RPM, so we could improve that 0 to 60 time, which frankly, it's kind of funny, the V8's slower than the V6. And this is the point of the episode where I turn this around to you guys to opine in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoManTV on Word, MotoManTV on Word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I do have to admit, I have not gotten my Panamera yayas out of my system, so Kumo and I are currently looking for good reasons as to why we need to get another Turbo SE Hybrid Sport Turismo back in the hangar. And I believe the one that is in LA is Mamba Green. So any suggestions as to reasons why we should get it again, comments below or on social media. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.